Hey guys, Panzer J back here in Operation A View to a Kill, and it's been decided among the five of us that we are gonna call the game here at the start of turn 21. We're going to declare it an Allied victory. Right now, I believe the point total is actually 777. We're all tied going into turn 21. This is definitely the longest game I've ever been a part of. And the most competitive, I would say. But the writing is on the wall. As far as the Axis go, we have really no path to an 8th point. The last real shot we had was here in Spain, and with that attack failing last turn, really no chance to get to 8 points for the Axis. So we're just going to start losing points from this point forward. The Russians can get to 8, I believe. I think this port here in the Crimea was damaged, so Pete could go ahead and repair that. And if I was him, I'd drop like 3 fast-build ports right there to make sure that doesn't happen again. So the Russians can get to 8, but the Allies are looking at, I believe, 8 at the end of turn 21 if we were to play. I believe Nanking is probably going to fall. And I'm not sure. I think there was maybe one other point that they could get. So, and it's just a matter of time. I mean, if we played turn 21, it'd probably be 8-8 with a common turn and the Allies, and we got to go to turn 22. And the Allies are just making way too much money. And they've got forces all over the board. They could potentially be in a position to take Helsinki, drop the Russians down 1 there. Probably they would make an all-out assault at some point here on Malta, and that's 2 points. So I believe we are in agreement that we're just going to call the game at this point. So it will be an Allied victory. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a recap video. I know the rest of the guys are going to put out recap videos as well. I'm not sure how in-depth I'm going to be with this recap video because this game has been so long that honestly I have forgotten some of the specific highs and lows on any given turn. I probably should have maybe jotted down some notes here and there after a particularly important turn or whatnot, but I did not. So, again, not sure how expansive my remarks are going to be, but we'll see. First, again, as always, got to compliment my opponents. This is the second game in a row that Global War 36 enthusiast was the Soviet Union. And honestly, I thought he played the best of us again. So 2 games in a row, I thought he deserved a victory. And unfortunately, he does not get it. But he has proven that playing as a Soviet Union isn't a death sentence, and that you can have the common turn be an extremely viable alliance here in the game. So definitely give him all kinds of props. We fought back and forth on the Eastern Front. A couple of times I threw a scare into him. I know he's mentioned that to me. So, but honestly, I didn't feel like I ever really had a great shot. Honestly, I think this might have been, I played Germany more than anybody else in the group, and I think this was not necessarily my weakest game as Germany, but at least in terms of the German-Russian conflict, I felt I was the least successful in this game as Germany going into Russia. Pete really played well. I liked his pre-war movements. He didn't go into Finland until late, so he saved units there. And just, he had saved up his money and just bought such a tremendous amount of infantry and militia that it was just like a slog match right from the start. I just couldn't really get any traction in Russia. So you definitely got to give Pete all kinds of props there. And then obviously he's got these huge armies here in Romania These guys are actually down in Turkey. I just didn't update the board there. And then he still got a huge force in Warsaw. So I was definitely on my heels. I honestly, if I was Pete, I would have went for Berlin. I know that he had mentioned that if he took Berlin, or at least made a move, a serious move towards Berlin, that would have affected things in France and possibly opened the door to the Allies getting Paris. And the net gain there for the Allies would have been more victory points than the Russians would have got for Berlin. So I definitely understood his logic there, but when, I suppose it's inevitable at some point I'll be the Russians. If I have a chance, I think I'm going for Berlin, even if it gives the game to the Allies, just for the cool factor of taking Berlin. Pete definitely had a window when he took Warsaw, which I didn't think was going to fall, honestly. He definitely could have kept going and raced towards Berlin, but we kind of worked something out at that point. And I kind of let him have his way to a certain extent down here in southeastern Europe. And then he stopped right there in Warsaw, basically. So, but again, great game, Pete. As far as the Allies go, I mean, obviously they played a great game. They're going to come out with the victory. I thought that Silk's moves at the beginning of the game were interesting, where he put a lot of money into a French Air Force and then put it on maps so that those planes did not fall when Paris fell. So that was interesting and gave the French quite a bit of a force once the Free French came into being. Also, he played great as the UK. We kind of went back and forth for a while here in Africa. I did have Italy looking pretty good for a while, but he pushed back pretty easily once he made a full effort there in Africa. There wasn't a whole lot I could do. And then Hambone backed him up quite a bit. Those guys taking Portugal since Spain still hadn't been decided. They went into Portugal and got a good foothold there, which obviously would have been a springboard into Madrid, let's say, if I would have been able to win in Spain. Plus, putting down the shipyards here allowed him or the ports, allowed him to build some ships there to try to go after my German-Italian fleet there in the Mediterranean. So kept putting a lot of pressure on me. And then when they made the move, they always kept a handful of transports here in England, so I never quite knew where they were going to go. They could have used them to come down here into the Med, obviously land back in France, but then inevitably they instead came up here. I had all of Norway at one point, so they took that from me, took Sweden, and then obviously are on the doorstep of Helsinki there. So I thought that was a good move with the Allies kind of diverting both my attention and the Soviet Union's attention away from what I thought was going to be the main focus here in France. So I thought both of those guys, Hambone and Silk, were played exceptional. And as a matter of fact, prior to the game, once I saw what the lineup was going to be, I knew the two of them would make a formidable team. So I figured that Bruce and I would have our hands full there. As far as the Pacific go, I'll let Bruce mostly talk about that. But again, I thought the Allies played exceptional here. Calcutta never fell. Sydney never fell. So Rich did a good job of holding on to the most vital territories here in the Pacific. Hambone, I thought, did great as the KMT. Obviously, they ended up evolving, which you don't see that often in this game. So I thought they gave Bruce all he could handle there in China. A constant drain on his resources. Something Bruce always had to think about. And then, obviously, the Allies are doing a little bit of the island hopping now here in the late game. So, as far as Bruce, he played a great game. I always love playing with Bruce. He's he's a character, that's for sure, and a really good guy, great player. So definitely had no issue teaming up with him again, and he played a really good game. He, I think his build into his Navy was exceptional. I mean, even in this late game, he still got Kido Butai. So I think the Japanese Navy kind of reigned supreme throughout the game. He did come down. He took Malaya. He had the Money Islands, and he did have most of China. So, I mean, not much more you can ask from a Japanese player at that point. It's just that when you're talking about a game going to turn 20, I don't know of too many games where the Axis are going to win at that point. You know, you're just getting squeezed from every direction, and resources are definitely becoming scarce. So I thought Bruce did exceptionally well. He took a lot of pressure off of the Italians, which I thank him for that. Allowed Italy to expand a little bit with some of the moves he was making in the South Pacific, triggered UK response. So I thought that was a really good teamwork there from Bruce. As far as with Germany and Italy, a couple of blunders on my part. One especially, kind of early, maybe the first third of the game or so, right as the Russians declared war. I had built up a pretty strong navy here in the Baltic, and Pete came over and wiped out my entire navy. I think I had 2 battleships, fleet carrier with a couple of fighters. I had 2 or 3 transports, and I lost everything. So that was extremely stupid on my part. I should have either moved the fleet over here, and he wouldn't have been able to get to it because I had Denmark, so he couldn't go through the strait there. Or at the very least, if I would have kept him in the Baltic, I should have at least put him in port, and I didn't do either. So I lost that entire navy, and that was extremely disappointing. Obviously, I had put a lot of resources in it, so those funds could have went elsewhere. But then also it was hopefully a deterrent and a threat to both the Soviet Union. Pete was right to be worried about it. It was potentially going to go to Leningrad once I went to war with the Soviet Union, bring those forces over, and then obviously ground forces through Poland there. But the other thing it was hopefully I wanted to lock a UK fleet in place here around the home islands there. Because at that point I had fully planned on bringing Italy into the conflict, and I didn't want the UK to send pretty much every ship they had down into the Med to fight Italy. So I figured if I had a strong German fleet here, along with transports, that would cause the UK to hold back a significant portion of their navy, and that way it would kind of let Italy have not necessarily a free reign, but a much easier time here in the Mediterranean. So once I lost that German fleet, it took away my threat to the Russians, and then also allowed the UK to kind of move everything, or at least most of their naval units, down to the Med. So that was extremely disappointing. It could have potentially went for an invasion of England as well. It would have depended on what kind of opportunities presented themselves. But like I said, mostly it was to possibly go into Leningrad, and then as a threat deterrent there for the UK Navy. But obviously that did not happen. Also with Germany, as far as in the Soviet Union, Pete jumped the gun there and declared war on me before, probably about a turn or so, maybe a turn or 2 before I was ready. I was trying to continue to build up my forces there on the Eastern Front, but that didn't happen. I was trying to go with basically an all mobile army. I know earlier in the game I was upgrading infantry to motorized infantry, and I had a pretty big stack of towed artillery pieces as well. And then obviously the motorized was going to tow the artillery pieces so that they could move two. They can't blitz, but they can still move two spaces. So I basically had made a decision at the start of the game that I was going to go with pretty much exclusively units in Russia that could move two spaces, just because there's so much territory there in Russia, and to be able to react to any kind of counterattack, like if I've got a big mobile force maybe in the south and Pete's making a move in the north, at least I have units that can move two spaces and kind of counterattack and maybe eliminate that threat. So I was going to go with pretty much all mobile units except for my paratroopers, which I do love those guys, and drop them strategically where possible. But again, I just never really got any traction in the Soviet Union. There's just so many, Pete dropped so many units. And when you're, and then the militia too, the militia attacking inside the Soviet Union, it was just, I was like trading, medium armors to kill, 3 militia. It was just ridiculous. There was just no way that was a viable strategy. Pete would counterattack me and soak up all his casualties with $2 militia, and he's taken out, like I said, medium armor or advanced mechs or whatever. It just wasn't viable. So I recognized pretty early in the fight with Russia that I wasn't going. Moscow was a complete pipe dream. And even Lebensraum, getting 2 cities, was going to be extremely difficult. So I basically just tried to keep my mobile forces intact and kind of move them around and like throw a scare into Pete here and there. I didn't want to completely withdraw from Russia. I mean, yes, those forces might have done good elsewhere, but then that would have just given Pete free reign to, without any threat whatsoever, just to move, move into Poland and whatnot. So I tried to keep a pretty big mobile force in Russia, just to, like I said, just kind of move around and throw a scare into him. If he moved in one direction, maybe I could move my units in the opposite. And I do believe that Pete did have some worries that maybe Leningrad at some point, or even Moscow, even though I don't think that was realistic, could possibly fall once I started moving those forces around. So, like I said, within the first couple of turns of the war with Russia, I recognized that it was just going to mostly be, try to keep him, back on his heels a little bit, and without a realistic chance of getting any victory points in Russia. With the Italians, again, my thinking early on was Italy's going to come into the war, and what would be the best way to put Italy in a good position. So for the first half a dozen turns or so, I was dropping colonial infantry here in Italian Somaliland, and doing militia upgrades and whatnot. I wanted to build up a pretty strong army here in East Africa, so that I could threaten some of these. Now, these territories don't have any value, but one of the victory points for the British is the unbroken railroad here in Africa. So if I take Sudan, for instance, that would have broken that. And I could have possibly threatened Cairo from the south. So I was putting a lot of money into building up some ground forces there in East Africa, and then also putting some money into the Navy. Now, what I tried to do at the time that I brought Italy into the conflict was at a time when Rich had a huge British fleet here in the Med, and he had brought it out to, I think, India, and was threatening Bruce. So my thinking at that point was, I'm going to bring Italy in. And what I actually hoped to do was to draw his navy back into the Med and take some pressure off of Bruce. Because it was a really big UK FEC Anzac fleet that was there. So that was what I was hoping was going to happen, and I thought it would, because Italy was then potentially threatening, Cairo, Transjordan, Syria, and with all those UK ships gone, the Italian Navy was king of the Med there. But surprisingly, Rich did not pull the UK Navy back. So in that sense, I miscalculation there. Not that I regretted bringing Italy into the war at that point, but I just thought it would trigger Rich to bring that UK Navy back into the Med, and it didn't. So then Bruce had to still fight that Navy on his own, which he did. But then that allowed, like I said, Italy to kind of have a free run of the Mediterranean for a few turns there. So that worked out for at least a little bit until, like I said, Rich decided to focus on the Italians there in East Africa. And then also one move I did was, once I had Italy in, even though they temporarily had the upper hand, I knew if Germany did not support the Italians, they had no chance. So, of course, I sent over the Africa Corps. But then the big thing I did was I dropped a bunch of ships here in southern France. The Italian Navy was already pretty strong on its own, but I wanted to get some German ships there in the Mediterranean, and I figured if I could combine the two, that would be big enough that I could seal off this end of the Mediterranean. Because, again, Rich never brought his Navy back towards the Suez, so I really didn't have any worries from this end of the Mediterranean. It was just over here with the UK and then eventually the US coming in. So I needed to block off this sea zone with as strong of forces as I could. So I dropped, I can't remember what it is exactly, 6 or 7, I think, maybe 6 destroyers. And I also put some subs. My subs I had brought, that was also getting later in the game, or at least mid-game, when the Allies had radar, or the UK had radar, so I wasn't going to do much damage, and I didn't want to risk my subs in terms of convoy rating. So I had brought all my subs from the Atlantic in and just parked everything right there in M2. And as if you guys watched Hambone's last video, he did go into M2 and attack that Navy, and he actually lost. So I had locked down, I accomplished at least that part of my strategy, locking down M2 here and preventing the Allies from coming in, which in turn allowed me to really, until this last turn, Rome was pretty sparse in terms of forces throughout the entirety of the game, because the Allies really didn't have much of a way to get to Rome with this end of the Med shut down. So that was good. I didn't have to spend a lot of money, and there's no German units in Rome either. So Germany didn't have to divert any forces to protect Rome itself. So that kind of was a dual purpose there. So that worked out well. But obviously the Allies are now starting to push back here off of Cairo. So I'm sure that would have been a problem very quickly here. As far as Malta goes, I would have preferred to have left that for the Italians, because that's part of an Italian victory point. But at the time, I saw that if I didn't take Malta with the Germans, Rich would have been able to reinforce it enough that the Italians wouldn't have been able to take it. So I gave up the idea of getting an Italian victory point just to get the Germans in there and deny the Allies the 2 points that Malta is part of. So, and then it was just a question of, again, since the Allies really didn't have any ships in the Med, I was able to shuffle forces with German and Italian transports down to Malta. Plus, I was doing the militia upgrade. So even now, Malta is still fairly well defended. So at least we did not deny the Allies the 2 points there. And that's also why I didn't go into Greece as the Italians, because you get a buck, but I didn't really have the forces. And since Malta was in German hands, having Greece doesn't accomplish the victory point. So I was like, there's no sense. So that's why I never went into Albania or Greece. It was just like, if Malta is going to be in German hands, it doesn't make any sense. So that was kind of how things were with Italy. Finally, in Spain, Pete and I didn't have any pre-game agreement. I know in the past there have been agreements that, hey, we won't attack you, you don't attack us kind of thing. Pete and I didn't have that. We just basically both decided on our own that we were going to stand pat, hope that the recruitment rolls hit, and then maybe late game go for Spain. And that's basically how I thought. I didn't want to take Spain early, and then give the Allies a chance to just take it back from me. So that's why I really didn't go in until late. As far as lend-leasing units, probably I guess I could have lend-leased a couple of turns before I did, got a couple more armor there, or maybe a fighter or two. But the problem was at that point, Germany was slowly losing income pretty much every turn. Even now, I'm down to only $47 with no bonuses. So I just needed all the money I could as Germany to help fight off the Russians and continue to build up the Atlantic Wall. So if I would have lend-leased a couple of turns earlier, that could have really led to some serious problems for Germany and Europe. So I'm not sure that I could have done that. And Italy just doesn't have the money to lend, a medium armor 4 or 5 turns in a row. So I think I did the best I could as far as the lend-lease portion of it. And then I think the battle, Rich said it was like a 60-40 that I would win, and we got our butts kicked. But as Rich is fond of saying, dice are dice. So, but I'm not sure that was necessarily the turning point. I mean, if I would have taken that, Axis would have been at 8, but I'll be interested to see Rich and Hambone's videos. I know the Allies had a strategy in place that if I would have taken the Spanish point, that they would have been in position to maybe take Madrid right back. So I'm not sure it would have really mattered in the end, but that was kind of my thinking in Spain. So hope you guys enjoyed this game. It was definitely the longest I've been a part of and extremely competitive. We've already got the next game lined up as far as who's playing who and the title. So I'll wait for Global War 36 enthusiasts to put that out, but we should be seeing you guys again pretty soon, and hopefully we'll have another enjoyable game to present to you guys. Take care.